3 hits away, and all of a sudden you're in a completely different I think we're in a weird place in society where the term drug is a blanket and it covers things that have vastly different effects. It covers caffeine, it covers nicotine, and it covers dimethyltryptamine, which is crazy. It's crazy that all those things are drugs. Adderall's a drug. Benzodiazepine is a drug. Xanax, there's a million of them. They're all different and they're all drugs. And the idea that psychedelics are a drug, for lack of a better term, that's what we use. I don't think that's what they are.
Sooner, but welcome just the same.
They are probably
I'm in the
why
mansion.
we became
Command
people.
center.
I think
Injured,
they are
but
probably
intact.
why society
Most everyone else
advanced.
is-
And I think
You've got
every
eyes.
great ancient
Look,
culture
we need to get
probably
this situation
celebrated
under
them
control
and used them.
ASAP.
It
You
seems
ready
like
for
there's so
anything?
much evidence out of Egypt, of psilocybin, various different drugs, various different psychedelic experiences. The iconography of the pineal gland seems to be a big part of multiple cultures, not just Egyptian, but even Catholicism. If you go to the Vatican, there's this enormous pine cone that is a statue there. And I was very lucky when I went to the Vatican. We got a guide. We hired a private guide that was a scholar from France. When he's not working in the summers, he gives these tours. They're very thorough.
Double poison.
Brilliant guy. I wish I could remember his name. I should probably find it out and give him credit. Brilliant guy. So he takes us through, showing us all his artwork. It's incredible. He's explaining why they had little penises, and if they just explained the whole thing that penis was not representative of like some of the class in education. And so we get to this pine cone, and he says to me, he goes, "Do you know what this represents?" And I said, "Is it the pineal gland?" And he goes, "Yes." And then we start this conversation of why these Catholics would have this enormous representation of the pineal gland, which they reference as the seat of the soul. And that this gland, which is in the center of your brain, is thought to be literally a third eye. And in reptiles, it actually has a cornea and a lens, this gland. Like, literally, it's exactly where the third eye of Eastern mysticism is. And they've got a representation of it right here. And it's thought to be where dimethyltryptamine is produced. And this whole connection to it is so old. It seems like you go back to the John Marco Allegro stuff, you go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are the oldest version of the Bible, the only version I believe the only version that have in Aramaic of all those stories. If he's right, if John Marco Allegro is right, it all kind of makes sense that these people were having these experiences much like the Greeks were with the Eleusinian mysteries, much like multiple different cultures in the Amazon, all over the world have experienced these profound ceremony experiences that lead to these journeys into the spirit world, these connections with higher consciousness. This is something that when you're experiencing it, it seems very, very real, but also very preposterous when you try to explain it to people that aren't experienced. You know, it's like Hendrix. Like, are you experienced? Have you ever been experienced? Well, I have. Like, it's that. Like, understanding that that's possible, the world changes. Because now you know that that's possible. You can live your whole life and not know that the most shocking, profound thing
That should fit any standard pressure control
existence is 3 hits away. 3 hits away. And all of a sudden you're in a completely different universe in 20, 30 seconds. That's nuts. And the fact that that is dismissed, that people look at it as like, oh, you're just a reality. It might be the source of civilization itself. It might be the source of language. It might be the source of the expansion of the human mind over a period of 2 million years, the development of the human brain over a period of 2 million years, which Terence McKenna felt directly coincides with the tropical rainforest turning into grasslands, which would force primates to experiment with new food sources, and these unknown cows that were everywhere that would shit, and then these psilocybin mushrooms would grow in their shit. observed primates flipping over these cow patties, looking for beetles and grubs and things to eat. It's everywhere. Like, you can see it all over Africa. If there's something on that, they're going to try it out. And if these things are trying it out, and they're doing this over a period of 2 million years, and they develop language and culture and weapons, and they start thinking about things, and they become different than every animal around them. And this was McKenna's theory, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And Dennis McKenna, who is a legitimate scientist, Dennis explains it even better, because he explains it with the actual mechanisms that your brain, the things that fire up when you encounter high-dose psilocybin experiences, that would lead to the development of language, glossolalia, connection of sounds and objects, and bringing things together in a manner. Also, they've realized that in low doses, it increases visual acuity. It makes people more amorous, makes people hornier. They're going to have more sex. They're going to be better hunters because they can see better. They're going to be a little more sensitive to the environment. They're going to be more aware. Edge detection's different. There's like so many different things that happen that if you're thinking about what made people people, it's a mystery. We want to pretend that we understand things because of the fossil record and this and that. Sure, we kind of understand, but every now and then we find a new human that we didn't even know exists, like Dennis Ovens. Not even 20 years ago, I don't think. So now there's a whole other branch of human beings that they weren't even aware of 20 years ago. Whatever the fuck happened that took us from all the other primates that are still here and made us this. It's pretty profound. And I have a feeling that psychedelics were at least involved in that process. And my belief is that the sweeping Psychedelics Act of 1970 that they passed essentially to target civil rights activists and anti-war activists. That's what they did. They wanted to go after the hippies. And they went after the hippies with MK Ultra, with Tom O'Neill so brilliantly outlines in his book Chaos. They went after it and they created the Manson family. They created that family. They taught that guy how to do that so that guy would kill people and he would be a psychopath, and now hippies would be psychopaths. And then all this anti-war shit would just get stopped by sensible people. Then, Schedule 1, everything. Psilocybin, marijuana, all down the board, everything becomes Schedule 1, the most illegal of illegal things. So all these people who are experiencing, all these Ken Kesey people and, all the LSD people, the 60s, all those people become criminals instantly. They just threw water on the whole movement, and it worked. It really worked. It was Nixon and all the people that were in charge back then. If you look at what happened from 1960 to 1980, this confusing era of the 70s where the effects are wearing off, and then you get into the 80s and everybody's doing coke and they have makeup on and big hair, and the music sucks. It's like something happened. Something happened. What happened was they completely removed the very thing that had changed culture so radically from the 50s to the 60s. Like, I'm a gigantic fan of 1960s automobiles. I love them. There's something about the shapes of them, the way they sound. I mean, part of it is that I grew up in the 80s, and those are the cars we all wanted. When we were kids, the guy drove by in a 1969 Camaro, we would all be like, whoa, look at it. Look at that thing. But there's something about those shapes. There's something about the designs of those cars that resonates so strongly today. A 1990 car ain't worth shit. Nobody wants your fucking 1990 car. 1990 Camaro, get the fuck out of here with that thing. 68 Camaro, people will stop in a parking lot and stare at it. What is that? I think those guys are on drugs. All those guys are on drugs. I think the guy who created the Corvette had to be on drugs. These guys were, they felt something the same way Hendrix felt something when he was on stage playing guitar in a way nobody had ever heard before. That guy came out of nowhere, and everybody was like, what the fuck is he doing? It was so different than Eric Clapton watched him for the first time and was like, I should probably quit playing guitar. Right. Like, what the fuck am I doing compared to this guy? Like, Jesus Christ, everybody's like, fuck you. 100%. 100%. There's something about growing water on that in the 1970s that I think has done a massive disservice to our civilization, a massive disservice, because it's equated these things with people that have poor discipline and bad social skills and ne'er-do-wells who fail in society, and that's not true. So, and all these people that I know that are billionaires, I know people that are like super rich people
Alpha team,
that
what
run
was
these
that?
financial
Body cam signal break.
institutions, and I know a lot of like brilliant venture capitalist guys, and brilliant tech guys, and almost all of them are enthusiasts. Almost all of them have had these experiences, and they're all kind of quiet about it. It's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate because of these stupid laws that were passed 50 years ago. We've gotten ourselves in this weird crunch where we've made things illegal that could massively help people progress in life and sort things out if we could figure out how to manage them correctly, if we could run proper studies about what is the correct dose. Is there a person that has a certain sort of physiological makeup that makes these drugs problematic? Do we find out who's allergic to them? There's many medications and many different compounds and many plants and natural things that people are allergic to. Let's avoid that. Let's try to figure out what works for some people, what doesn't work. Let's have legitimate counselors that could guide people through experiences, people that have experienced it themselves and can understand how to do this with intent and possibly aid your life. They have been shown to be hugely beneficial for soldiers, for our military men and women coming back from overseas experiencing horrific trauma, to help them get past that. And yet there are things still. And we're old, middle-aged men, right? So who is telling us what we can and can't do? It's preposterous. This is men our age that haven't had these experiences. Taking this control on them in a completely different way. They don't know what these things are. They don't know what the experience is. And yet they want it to be kept out of the hands of kids. We're going to keep it off the streets. Keep drugs away from our society. And you don't know what you're talking about. It might be why we're here, and it also, the absence of it, might be why we're so fucked up. It might be why we're so disconnected, why we're so disjointed, and our society is so hypocritical. I mean, the most pro-life people are also pro-death people. It's like across the board, everything. The people that, want no crime, but don't want to stop the emergence of crime by funding programs to try to fix the inner cities. And they want to, our whole thing is disconnected. And I have a feeling, part of that is that we have not been given access to tools that have helped people become what we are today. If they're to, if you believe Brian Murray Rescue's work, if he's correct, and these people that are studying the Palestinian histories and the literal emergence of democracy as we know it, all of it came out of psychedelic experiences.
Can a soldier's PTSD be cured by eating the flesh of the gods? Some scientists and activists think that might just be possible. We're not actually talking about divine cannibalism here, don't worry. It's all about magic. Magic mushrooms, that is. One of nature's most popular hallucinogens. These mysterious mushrooms have been the subject of fascination, debate, and thriving subcultures for decades. But are they a menace or medicine? Is the potential key to the secrets of the human mind just something people do at Coachella, or something far more sinister? Stick around and see, because today we're taking an in-depth look at what happens to your body and your mind on mushrooms. So what exactly are these special drugs? What about them is so supposedly magical? Well, it's not really magic. It's a little substance called psilocybin. There are over 100 species of psilocybin-containing mushrooms in the genus psilocybe, as well as several other genera of mushrooms that have been found to contain the substance. Psilocybe mushrooms are the most commonly used, however, So for the purpose of this video, we'll be sticking to those. These mushrooms are dark spored, filled, and tend to grow in tropical and subtropical climates, primarily Mexico, Canada, and the US. The majority of psilocybin mushroom species are found in subtropical humid forests. But that's enough mycology for now. We're here to talk about what these mushrooms actually do to the brains and the bodies of those who ingest them. So let's imagine that someone has eaten a psilocybin mushroom, and alongside that mushroom they've swallowed a tiny little magic school bus style vehicle that we can pilot through their intestines. What's going on? Keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. Here we go. Wow, they really should walk better. Right, down to the stomach, where it's being digested. We all know how that part goes, but it's about to get exciting. See, the psilocybin they just ingested is headed to the liver, where it's about to be broken down into psilocin. Now, let's head up to the brain, where the real party is about to get started. That psilocin is binding to specific serotonin receptors, which you provide so they can speed down the neural islands. Now, the brain is lighting up with activity as the psilocin begins to work its magic, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain responsible for abstract thinking, as well as mood and perception. Meanwhile, regions of the brain that don't usually communicate with each other start feeling really chatty, firing off wild signals that result in hallucinations. If we speed back out through the nose and take a look at our patient from the outside, we can see dilated pupils, a drowsy expression, and relaxed muscles. Wow, that's so embarrassing. They just dropped their phone. Can't really blame them though. Psilocybin can also cause a lack of coordination. Nausea and vomiting are also on the table, but hopefully we won't be seeing any of that. Let's head back on inside and take another look at the brain. More specifically, let's see what our patient is seeing and take a look through their eyes. Don't question it, we're operating on magic school bus logic here, and this person's on a mushroom trip. Their trip is just beginning to peak, a period of the experience that lasts for the first 3 to 4 hours after ingestion. It's getting trippy in every sense as visual and auditory hallucinations begin to set in, as well as an altered perception of time and space. Has it been 4 hours yet? No? It's been 10 minutes? Cool. Colors are beginning to look brighter, and images in our patient's view are shimmering and warping like the surface of the water, while some items appear to expand and contract as if they're breathing. All of the senses feel turned up to 11, and hearing certain sounds might trigger the sudden appearance of colors in a drug-induced bout of synesthesia. Thankfully, our patient prepared a comfortable environment, and they're in little danger of having a bad trip. All in all, it's a bit like a walking dream, and there's a reason for that. A 2014 study determined that psilocybin increases the type of brain activity seen during sleep. This is the same heightened activation of the emotional centers that occur when someone is dreaming. Well, let's leave our patient alone for now. Let's let them stare at that magic eye poster and listen to their classic rock. We aren't done learning about mushrooms just yet. Where exactly did these fun-time fungi come from? They're naturally occurring, sure, but when did humans discover their unusual psychoactive properties? Psilocybin-rich, so-called magic mushrooms have a long storied and somewhat contentious history. Historians have traced the supposed use of these mushrooms as far back as the ancient Mayan and Aztec civilizations, pointing to statues and artistic representations of mushrooms found in Central American ruins as evidence. Additionally, there are records of Aztec people using a substance known as Terminaca, or flesh of the gods, which many of these same historians believe to be these same mushrooms. These mushrooms were used alongside other natural psychotropics, including peyote and morning glory seeds, to produce visions in the euphoric state in which one could potentially communicate with the gods. Spiritual practices involving these sacred mushrooms have been traced back 3,500 years in areas from the Valley of Mexico to the rest of Central America, including Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The rituals were performed by the Huastec, Totonac, Mazatec, and the Mixtec people. Some examples of art depicting psychoactive mushrooms and plants include a sculpture of Xochipilli, the Aztec god of flowers, found on the volcano Popocatépetl, and the Tepantila mural in Teotihuacan. The sculpture includes depictions of psilocybe as a flower native to the region, as well as tobacco, Hyena saligifolia, and the hallucinogenic ololiuki. The mural, which dates back to 500 CE, depicts the Toltec rain god Tlaloc, along with men who appear to be priests holding hallucinogenic mushrooms where the god's raindrops fall. These same mushrooms are also believed to have played a role in the coronation ceremonies of various Aztec emperors, including Tzolk'in, Huitzol, and Moctezuma II. In the 16th century, Spanish Catholic missionaries who came to the Americas, including Spanish vicar Diego Duran, wrote about these fungi-assisted religious ceremonies. He wrote, "Wild mushrooms are spoken of, and they were eaten raw." Spanish friar Bernardino de Sahagún, who traveled to Mexico during the 16th century, described these mushrooms as well, and elaborated on their effects. The little mushrooms that grow in this land are named teonanaka. They grow beneath the hay in the fields and plains. They are round, and their stems are tall and round and slender. Their taste is unpleasant. They cause sore throat and drunkenness. They are used as medicine for fever and gout. The organ, two or three. Those who eat them see visions and feel fluttering at the heart. The visions they see are sometimes frightening and sometimes humorous. Those few who eat them in excess are guilty of lust. Silly and naughty boys are told that they have eaten a naka. In spite of the long history of magic mushrooms, they did not get mainstream attention in the United States until the 1950s. In 1955, an amateur mycologist and J.P. Morgan bank vice president named Gordon Wasson became the first modern Westerner to experience documented and Mazatec psychedelic mushroom ceremony. His story was published in Life magazine in 1957 under the title Seeking the Magic Mushroom. He describes his experiences with the ceremony, which he participated in with his friend Alan Richardson. By the way, Alan had promised his wife Mary before leaving for Mexico that he would never try these hallucinogenic mushrooms, but when faced with the opportunity, he chose to partake. He did experience a bit of regret, however, reportedly muttering to himself, "My God, what will Mary say?" just before eating his share. The mushrooms were provided by a mother-daughter pair of curanderos, or shamans, who gave each of the two Americans a cupful of 6 pairs. Wasson ate them and detailed what happened next. They tasted bad, acrid with a rancid odor that repeated itself. Alan and I were determined to resist any effects they might have, to observe better the events of the night, but our resolve soon melted before the onslaught of the mushrooms. And what did that onslaught look like? Visions that lasted deep into the night until around 4 in the morning. Watson said, they were in vivid color, almost harmonious. They began with art motifs, emblems such as might decorate carpets or textiles or wallpaper, or the drawing board of an architect. Then they evolved into palaces or courts, arcades, gardens, or splendid places all laid over with semi-precious stones. Then I saw a mythological beast drawing a regal chariot. Later it was as though the walls of our house had dissolved, and my spirit had flown forth, and I was suspended in midair, viewing landscapes of mountains with camel caravans advancing slowly across the slopes, the mountains rising tier above tier to the very heavens. All in all, he witnessed 9 mushroom ceremonies. He also sampled the mushrooms outside of the ceremonial context, trying them with his wife and their 18-year-old daughter, Masha. And he wasn't done with them yet either. He gathered some of the mushrooms in Mexico and brought them back with him to New York, where he ate the dried specimens in his bedroom. He discovered that, if anything, they had gained their hallucinogenic potency. One of those mushrooms, a sample of Psilocybe mexicana, would serve as a primary specimen in the research of a scientist named Albert Hofmann, who would later be known as the father of LSD. A colleague of Wasson, Roger Hine, reached out to Hoffman and encouraged him to isolate and extract the psilocybin and psilocin from those mushrooms. This research was successfully completed in 1958. By 1962, Hoffman and Franz Troxler had patented psilocybin synthesis. That Life magazine article of Wasson's attracted the attention of another famous name in the world of psychotropic drugs, Timothy Leary. After reading the article, he became interested in the mushrooms, and in 1960 began experimenting with them at Harvard University as part of the Harvard Psilocybin Project. The founding board of this project included Leary, as well as Frank Baring, Ralph Metzner, and Aldous Huxley. If that name sounds familiar, he was also the author of Brave New World. These experiments included the Concord Prison Experiment, which involved dosing inmates with psilocybin in an attempt to prevent them from the March Chapel Experiment, also known as the Good Friday Experiment. In the Marsh Chapel Experiment, a Harvard Divinity School graduate student working under supervision administered psilocybin to Boston area graduate divinity students. This was intended to test the potential for drug use in religious states, similar to those achieved in the traditional mushroom ceremonies, but with a much more explicitly Christian bent. The program ended in March 1962, when other professors at the Harvard Center for Research in Personality began to bring up concerns about the safety and academic merit of these experiments. But the new widespread fascination with these magic mushrooms was not going anywhere. But as the mushrooms and other psychedelics became more popular, the United States federal government began to crack down on them. In 1968, the possession of psychedelics was criminalized under the Staggers-Dodd Bill. In 1971, then-President Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs and passed the Controlled Substances Act, which classified psilocybin as a Schedule I drug. The United Kingdom passed similar legislation around that same time. However, their newfound criminalization didn't stop mushroom enthusiasts from cultivating these mind-bending fungi at home. In the mid-1970s, psilocybin enthusiasts began to do just that, as the possession of spores and mushrooms themselves, rather than the isolated psilocybin and psilocin, remained illegal in most states. Some enterprising amateur mycologists, like Dennis McKenna, a hobbyist who published Psilocybin Magic Mushroom Grower's Guide in 1976, after successfully growing some of the mushrooms in a mason jar. The ideal species for home growers was Psilocybe cubensis, and mason jars were the perfect place to grow them. This subculture of home mushroom growing quickly expanded to an underground network of advice and mail-order spore samples. In the 1990s, the art of magic mushroom cultivation was still being refined and redefined by enthusiasts. One man, a jazz musician named Robert McPherson, would fill a mason jar with grain, seal the jar's lid with tape, punch holes in the lid, and inject syringes filled with a liquid solution of spores into the jar. He adjusted this method, working to protect the sample inside the jar from contamination. After some finagling, he found that it worked. He didn't just stop there, but began selling these syringes of liquid spores by mail, along with instructions on the technique he had developed. In 1991, he began advertising this technique and service in the ads purchased in the back of High Times magazine. While McPherson was growing mushrooms, something else was growing: the early stages of the World Wide Web. The internet allowed a broader audience to discover McPherson and home mushroom cultivation as a whole. Just like the fruity bodies that were growing at home, the community rapidly began to expand. In 1997, a teenager founded Shroomery.net, an online forum dedicated to information on psychedelics, including the cultivation of psilocybin mushrooms. Other forums soon followed, such as Mycotopia.net, and the community growth continued to snowball. The practices have evolved over the years as the internet and its users have grown and changed, but many of these forums are still active today. In recent years, there's been a movement to decriminalize psilocybin and psychedelic mushrooms, which has begun to see some success in the United States. In 2019, Denver, Colorado decriminalized the substance, followed by Oakland and Santa Cruz, California in June 2019 and January 2020. In 2020, a ballot measure passed in Oregon that made it the first state to decriminalize psilocybin and legalize its supervised use. In June 2023, America's first ever licensed psilocybin service center opened in Eugene, Oregon, where it quickly accumulated a waitlist of over 3,000 potential patients. The fight for the legalization of psilocybin is primarily based on its potential therapeutic benefits. But what exactly are these post-therapeutic benefits of psilocybin? Though there is still much debate surrounding the efficacy of psilocybin, there is mounting evidence to suggest that it might provide a new potential treatment avenue for debilitating mental health conditions, such as treatment-resistant depression and PTSD. In 2022, a study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, carried out by the London-based Compass Pathways, that suggested as much. CNBC reported on the subject. In the study, 233 patients who had previously tried antidepressants with little success were given a dose of psilocybin. After taking the drug, they experienced a walking dreamlike state. They were then permitted to leave the clinic once they felt like themselves again. A 25 milligram dose of psilocybin, along with therapy, was shown to reduce depression levels after 3 weeks. In a King's College press release, senior clinical lecturer and consultant psychiatrist James Runker spoke on the study, saying, "Our task is now to investigate psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression in larger trials with more participants, comparing its goals to placebo and established treatments." Flaws in the research study were pointed out by other experts, however, such as Ravi Saad at the University College London Institute of Mental Health, who noted that there were not an equal number of severely depressed subjects in each dosage group of the experiment. This was not the only study of its kind, though. Clinical trials of psilocybin administered in 1 or 2 doses in a therapeutic setting have also shown a positive effect on treatment-resistant depression, leading the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to designate psilocybin treatment as a breakthrough therapy, which will allow additional research into the drug to be supported by the FDA. Compass Pathways described this as a significant milestone for psilocybin therapy and psilocybin research. According to CNN, neurologist Richard Isaacson of the Alzheimer Prevention Clinic and the Center for Brain Health at Florida Atlantic University potential therapeutic applications of the drug. The Data are strong from depression to PTSD, which is one of the most painful conditions I'm aware of. I'm excited about the future of psychedelics because of the relatively good safety profile, and because these agents can now be studied in rigorous double-blinded clinical trials. And we can prove from anecdotal reports of, I tripped on this and felt better, to try this and it will be statistically significantly better. But how exactly might a substance primarily associated with concerts and festivals in the desert work to treat these mental health conditions? Well, part of that package might lie in the relationship between psilocybin and serotonin. It might increase the levels of serotonin available to brain cells, similar to how selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, work. Pharmacologist Brian Roth of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill reported that scientists can see changes within 30 minutes to the connectivity of
Doctor,
brain
you make
neurons.
suggestions,
Others,
you
like
don't
David
give
Nutt,
orders.
director of the Neuropsychopharmacology Unit in the Division of Brain Sciences at Imperial College London, have argued that the disorganization in the brain caused by psychedelics can disrupt the negative thought patterns caused by depression. In his words, critical thoughts are easier to control, and thinking is more flexible. That's why the drug is an effective treatment for depression. Nutt also described an increase in branching of neurons. They can increase synapses. That's called neuroplasticity. Continue. You shake up the brain, you see things in a more positive way, and then you lay down those positive circuits with the neuroplasticity. It's a double win. We can't talk about medical background without using a microdosing. Say that 5 times fast. Microdosing refers to taking extremely small amounts of psilocybin mushrooms several times a week, something around 0.1 to 0.3 grams, as opposed to the 25 milligrams used to induce a problem. There have yet to be any studies suggesting that microdosing has the same potential benefits, and some attribute the anecdotal reports of positive experiences to the placebo effect. However, some scientists believe that it is still a subject worth studying. Of course, no mind-altering substance comes without risks. The use of psychedelics can, in some cases, be linked to psychotic episodes and the onset of schizophrenia, often assumed to be related to the stereotypical bad trip. This risk is higher in those with a family history of schizophrenia or any disorders associated with psychosis. For this reason, research into psilocybin tends to screen for and exclude those who might experience those adverse effects, such as those with a personal history of psychosis, mania, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder. A bad trip can also trigger a sense of extreme anxiety or doom, one that can linger long after the trip itself has concluded. What exactly is the likelihood of long-term consequences from a bad trip? It's difficult to say. The 2017 study from Johns Hopkins University Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences attempted to measure the enduring positive and negative consequences of psilocybin in 1,993 individuals. It found that 39% of those surveyed said that their bad trip was one of the most challenging experiences of their life. 4% said they had experienced long-term benefits from their trip in spite of its difficulty. All in all, the jury is still out on the future of magic mushrooms as medicine. They may work for some, and they might be harmful for others. And another group might just like to go to every once in a while to better appreciate the musical stylings of fish. Only time and more research will tell what else will become of them in terms of legality or therapeutic applications. Now check out what happens to your body when smoking weed, or watch this instead. Will cannabis survive the apocalypse? Did William Shakespeare smoke a bowl before he wrote a play? Why'd you get the munchies after toking? Which presidents liked to get dank on their downtime? Who smoked so much weed it kills you? These are 50 chronically insane facts about weed. Fact 50. Cannabis is one of the earliest plants to be cultivated by humans. Mentions of it have been found in writings from as far back as 3000 BC, and possible evidence of cannabis use has been identified archaeological sites that are over 10,000 years old. Most of the early evidence of cannabis use comes from Asia, with prehistoric cannabis residues and fiber imprints having been found across China, Japan, India, and the Middle East. Historians believe that these ancient cultures used the plant not just for its psychoactive properties, but also to make rope, clothes, shoes, paper, and even as a food source. Fact 49. Have you ever wondered where the word marijuana actually comes from? Well, there are a couple of competing theories. According to one popular story, it comes from a Nahuatl word, meaning prisoner. This explanation probably isn't true, though, It was first popularized by anti-drug campaigner Harry J. Anslinger in the 1930s. The more likely explanation is that it comes from the Chinese ma ren hua, meaning hemp flower. Ganja, another popular nickname for the drug, comes from the Sanskrit word for the hemp plant. Fact 48. People have had it out for cannabis for over 700 years. Throughout history, marijuana has been mainly used for medicinal and spiritual purposes, but even so, it's always been a pretty controversial substance. In fact, the first known laws restricting marijuana use come from all the way back in the Middle Ages. The earliest known cannabis legislation is believed to be a law passed in the 1300s by an Arabian emir called Sultan Sheikun. Cannabis use was also made illegal by Napoleon Bonaparte during his reign, and was widely outlawed throughout the British Empire during its heyday. Fact 47. The United States has something of a love-hate relationship with the hemp plant. America started restricting the sale of the drug in 1906, but only made it outright illegal in 1937 when the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. For some reason, hemp was outlawed alongside cannabis, but that wasn't the case for long. Once the U.S. entered World War II, the government started making propaganda that encouraged hemp cultivation. Since the hemp plant could be used to make cheap but durable rope and canvas, that was vital to the war effort. Hemp was then banned again in the 70s under the Controlled Substances Act, and the plant remained illegal until the Controlled Substances Act was revised in 2018. Even though legalization is still strictly regulated, in 2019 the U.S. managed to become the world's third biggest hemp producer after China. Urkel has his own bespoke line of weed. Jaleel White launched his own brand of recreational weed called It's Purple, a variant of the purple Urkel cannabis strain. Jaleel White, of course, was famous back in the 90s for playing the nerdy Steve Urkel on the sitcom Family Matters. When asked about It's Purple by Forbes, White said he started the business because he was tired of seeing his character's name and likeness used without his involvement, and figured he could get in on the action. He even filmed ads for it alongside Snoop Dogg, where he was fully in character as Steve Urkel. Fact 45. Reggae legend Bob Marley was buried with weed. Perhaps one of the most famous tokers of all time, music god Bob Marley took the plant to the grave with him. When he died of cancer in 1981, according to some accounts, he was buried with a football, his beloved Gibson Les Paul guitar, and a bud of chronic. Hopefully, he's still lighting it up in the great beyond. Fact 44. There are over 1,000 ways to say it. Literally, Time magazine has reported that there are over 1,200 popularly used slang terms for cannabis. And here are some of our favorites. Weed, bud, ganja, chronic, grass, wacky tobacco, reefer, herb, green goddess, sweet Mary Jane, Donna Juanita, pot, dank, and the devil's lettuce. If we forgot one of your favorites, let us know in the comments. Fact 43. Tupac's closest friends smoked him. And no, that's not a euphemism. When Tupac was tragically murdered in 1996, his old band and close friends, the Outlaws, claimed to have gave him a rapper send-off, rolling some of his cremains into a joint with some weed and smoking him up. While some have doubted these claims, the Outlaws themselves have stuck to their story. Personally, we think this one's up there with Marley's coffin weed. Fact 42. A group of weed-hunting teens invented 420. It's one of the most popular codes for cannabis, and it's the reason that April 20th, previously best known as the birthday of the decidedly unchill Adolf Hitler, is now synonymous with sharing some herbal love. In the early 1970s, a group of high schoolers from San Rafael High School in California went hunting for a legendary weed farm in their area, using the code 420 to signify the hunts. While they never found the El Dorado of ganja, their story and their secret code got picked up by the magazine High Times and the band Grateful Dead, leading to the phrase becoming forever cemented in cannabis culture language. Fact 41. Washington was the first U.S. state to legalize recreational marijuana use. And this is kind of poetic, given the state's namesake, America's first president, George Washington, famously cultivated hemp crops. He was a big fan of the plant, mentioning it over 90 times in his personal diaries. But there is no evidence that he ever used it to get high. Instead, he likely grew the plant due to its valuable resource for manufacturing those sturdy ropes we mentioned earlier for use in ship construction. The original United States flag, created by Betsy Ross, was even made out of the kind of hemp that Washington loved cultivating. It's as American as apple pie. Fact 40. A lot of celebrities smoke weed. Seriously, it'd be a whole video to list them all, but some of the most prominent, famous, avowed potheads include Jennifer Lawrence, Kirsten Dunst, Miley Cyrus, Zoe Kravitz, Lady Gaga, Brad Pitt, Jane Fonda, Harrison Ford, Charlize Theron, Pete Davidson, Morgan Freeman, Patrick Stewart, Rihanna, Snoop Dogg and Seth Rogen, Willie Nelson, Woody Harrelson, Kendall Jenner, and Matthew McConaughey. And those are just the ones who admit it. Fact 39. Washington wasn't the only president with a history of weed use, and these presidents actually did smoke it. George W. Bush is an admitted weed user, and Barack Obama even had a weed-smoking club in his youth called the Choom Gang. According to some of the Choom Gang's other members, Obama actually pioneered some new weed consumption techniques, including TA, or total absorption, and roof hits. And yes, there is a cruel irony to the fact that both those presidents smoked weed, but neither of them legalized it on the federal level. We guess they just wanted to keep it all to themselves. Fact 38. The government could be making billions of dollars from marijuana. Extrapolating from the tax money that states with legal weed have already made, it's estimated that across the entire United States, the federal government could make $8.5 billion in tax revenue, and potentially more if they institute a so-called potency tax, where taxation of cannabis is put on a sliding scale based on how potent the strain is. And even this is nothing compared to the money that private industry stands to make. It's estimated that if weed was legalized in all 50 states, it would quickly become a bigger market than organic food. Fact 37. The U.S. military experimented with weaponized weed. Researchers at the Edgewood Arsenal facility in Maryland pioneered dimethylheptylpyrin. Try saying that 3 times fast. An extremely potent cannabinoid agent that had an elimination half-life of 20 to 39 hours. That's some serious sticky. In addition to the standard sedative and hallucinogenic effect, it also caused low blood pressure, dizziness, fainting, ataxia, and muscle weakness. So much so that someone under the effects of dimethylheptylpyrin had difficulty even standing upright. Obviously, the researchers at Edward didn't invent this just so U.S. soldiers could get high on government-subsidized ultra weed. They were exploring the possible use as a non-lethal crowd control agent, but that fell through because of the potential risks involved with the health of certain at-risk users and the political sensitivity of working with weed. Fact 36. For some people, marijuana use is a religious affair, and some countries even legally recognize this. In Italy, after a lengthy court battle back in 2008, it was deemed that people of the Rastafarian faith keep weed for purely personal use. It's a religious sacrament. In possession cases, it would be up to the courts to decide, based on the quantity of the weed, whether it was for personal use or trafficking. Fact 35. Weed is giving coffee a run for its money. At least in Denver, in 2011, some counts showed weed dispensaries outnumbering Starbucks locations 300 to 266. Weed dispensaries were so rife that a popular local magazine even had a review gave their take on the local crime. Fact 34. Weed is the world's favorite illicit drug. While debate rages on about how exactly weed is classified, the evidently isn't up for debate. The fact that people absolutely love it. According to some data, 219 million people, that's 4.3% of the global population, between the ages of 16 and 64, used cannabis at least once in 2021. Fact 33. One of the first sales ever brokered on the internet was allegedly weed. In 1971, a Stanford student and an MIT student connected over the ARPANET, the precursor of the internet, created by the precursor of DARPA. How did these two students of two of the country's most prestigious learning institutions use this connection, forged over a revolutionary new technology? To get high, of course. They organized the sale of weed, and in the process became accidental pioneers of illicit e-commerce. Fact 32. How much weed does it take to kill you? Well, we can only discuss this theoretically given that there are no recorded deaths related to cannabis overdose. Of course, it is possible to have a bad reaction, especially if it's in the edibles, which have a more potent high than smoking. But when it comes to drugs that are still illegal, cannabis is still one of the safest out there, compared to fentanyl, where as little as 2 milligrams can be fatal. Fact 31. Some people have proposed medical marijuana for dogs. However, while some pet owners have given anecdotal evidence of their sick pets having been relieved by marijuana, most veterinary experts are skeptical. Dogs in particular are extremely vulnerable to marijuana toxicosis, especially when weed is consumed in a nectar that dogs already shouldn't be eating, like brownies. So just to be safe, stick only to the treatments prescribed by professionals who are treating your sick pets, or you would be putting their life on the line. Fact 30. Weed weed is in the air over Italy. And no, it isn't because Italy has a massive Rastafarian population who just love indulging in their newly legalized religious sacraments. We're not entirely sure why they did this, but Italy's Institute for Atmospheric Pollution Research decided to conduct a year-long study to monitor the effects of psychotropic substances in the air in 8 different Italian cities: Bologna, Florence, Milan, Naples, Palermo, Rome, Turin, and Verona. They ended up finding trace amounts of marijuana and cocaine in all 8 of them. Fact 29. A North Carolina hospital thought people were toking up around newborns. Social services started getting extremely concerned when urine tests from a number of newborns appeared to show trace amounts of marijuana in their systems, believed to be a result of secondhand smoke from overly mellow parents. However, when they dug deeper, they found out that the actual truth was even stranger. Chemicals in several different baby soaps, specifically Johnson & Johnson's head-to-toe baby wash, Johnson & Johnson bedtime bath, CVS nighttime baby bath, Aveeno soothing relief creamy wash, and Aveeno wash shampoo, seemed to trigger false positives for marijuana. If this wasn't discovered, it could have resulted in some life-ruining accusations getting thrown around. Fact 28. Illegal weed operations have been killing off owls. In another valuable argument for legalization, illegal pot operations have been having a ruinous effect on local ecosystems. In 2012, rare spotted owls were found dead in Northern California's Mendocino County. The culprit? Rat poison, specifically rat poison used by a local illegal operation to keep pests away from their crop. But it isn't just the owls. The fish are a rare forest native to the area has also been put in a dangerous position by careless weed farmers. Rat poison has been found in the system of 85% of dead fishers found in the area, also believed to be caused by illegal weed operations. Fact 27. Is weed getting stronger? Researchers studied 36,800 samples of weed captured by the DEA over the last 20 years and found 2 interesting results. The THC, the psychoactive compound in marijuana, has increased, and the amount of CBD, the chemical compound most often touted as having health benefits, has decreased. So when old stoners tell you that the weed was more chill back in their day, not just blowing smoke. Well, they probably still are, but just not about that. Fact 26. You can be allergic to weed. As if life for people with allergies wasn't hard enough, yes, you can also be allergic to Puff the Magic Dragon, both its pollen and its smoke. Allergic reactions can include runny noses, sneezing, irritation of the nasal passages, hives, and in one extremely rare case, flaxes. For some people who experience allergic reactions to weed, it's actually the weed itself that gets them. Improperly stored weed can sometimes get that mold sometimes has allergenic properties. Fact 25. Weed dependency is a genetic lottery. Like with all drugs, everyone has a different tolerance for weed. And the same goes for whether someone is likely to become dependent on it. Researchers have identified 3 different genetic markers as predictors for the likelihood of cannabis dependence. Fascinatingly, these same genetic markers are often also predictors for depression, showing that people who suffer from depression are sometimes more likely to use weed as an unhealthy coping mechanism. Fact 24. If you're an unlucky stoner, you might get cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And that might sound horrifying, but, well, there is no but. It actually is horrifying. Chronic cannabis users who suffer from the syndrome will experience periods of severe nausea followed by cycles of profuse vomiting and abdominal pain over a 48-hour period. Doesn't sound like a fun time to us. Fact 23. Drug traffickers can get really creative with how they smuggle weed. Here's a highlight reel of some of the most deranged ways weed has been smuggled. 766 pounds of pot hidden in broccoli. 1,500 pounds hidden in coconuts. 4,000 pounds hidden in fake limes. $500,000 worth of it hidden in fake carrots. Hidden in vats of strawberry jam. It's kind of weird how most of them are just fruits and vegetables. Let's see some creativity, guys. Fact 22. Debates have raged on for years on whether Shakespeare liked to partake in a bit of the devil's lettuce. During an excavation of the immortal bard's home, 2 pipes were found with, among other things, cannabis residue. Immediately this, plus Shakespeare's reference to a noted weed, part one of his sonnets, and people claim that one of history's greatest playwrights was an avowed stoner. This immediately led to scholarly debate after scholarly debate, with some on the side of weed, and the skeptics claiming that there's no proof that the life belongs to nature. The debate has raged on for so long that Francis Thackeray, an anthropologist from South Africa, is taking the opportunity to exhume and test his remains for any traces of cannabis. They might be taking this a little bit too seriously. Fact 21. Might change how you think about money. Studies have shown that cannabis reduces activity in the nucleus accumbens, a reward center of the brain involved in dopamine production. Those under the influence of cannabis are less likely to produce the kind of dopamine that motivates them toward external rewards, like money.